Hi everybody, my name is Tori Earle and I am an Extension Specialist for 4-H Youth Development with the University of Kentucky's College of Agriculture, Food and Environment Cooperative Extension Service. We're here today to introduce you to this year's 4-H National STEM Challenge, which is called Mars Base Camp.
If you hadn't noticed, this year we're doing the National 4-H STEM Challenge training just a little differently. This first segment is on the Mars Base Camp Landing Zone Surveyor activity from the 4-H STEM Challenge.
The Landing Zone Surveyor activity goes through several different phases as you would do it. You've got your launch, cruise, and approach phase where you would encourage teammates to count down from launch, and if they miss their target or land off the map, or they land on a grid square that someone's already landed on, they'll just pick their lander back up, move around to the back of the line, and start again. On their orbit entry and descent for the landing phase, team lands on the target. They're going to determine what grid squares they land on. The grid squares on the corners, A1, A4, D1, and D4, are considered in orbit around Mars. They have not actually landed, so they are going to be orbiters. And if they land on any of the other squares on the surface, they are going to have to determine if they had a safe landing or not. So in that safe landing, you would, after they get on the grid square, before they would get a landing card, they are going to roll a die, and depending on what number comes up is depending on if they had a safe landing or not. In your facilitator guide on page 16, it gives you the number choices for the different landing scenarios that they could have. So some of the things that you can do are you can ask different questions in discovering information about their landing cards that they would have. The landing cards are designated for each of the grid squares. And just ask them questions about what they discovered from their landing card or what they discovered from their orbiter. For example, find out the ones that went into orbit and then ask them about the name of their orbiter. There are 4 different ones. And when did it go into orbit around Mars? Is it still there? Is it still sending back information? Other questions you can ask them are who has a landing site with ice, who has a site with a volcano, and all of this information will be on their landing cards, so they should be able to tell you if they have discovered what's going on or what is on their card. The reflection stage of the landing zone activity, give everyone a chance to talk about what they learned based on either their card or their experience getting the lander to Mars. They could share things about what they noticed or learned about Mars during the activity. Were all the landing sites the same, or did each one of them have kind of different features to it? They could reflect on what do you think makes some of the places different? What caused them to be different over the time that they were being formed? Do we know information about the different landing sites ahead of time, or do we learn that as we get there? So if you were planning a mission to Mars, what do you think would be a good place to try to lander over? Ask them that. Apply what you think would be a good spot to build a base camp. What would be some of the characteristics of that to build your base camp? The first step in setting up the landing zone surveyor is to designate your launch site. The launch site should probably be from 3 to 5 feet away from the map. Right now we've got about 5 feet from our blue line over to our Mars map. If you're working with younger youth, ages 8 to 10, you might want to move it a little closer, but 11 and over, you might even make it a little more challenging for them and move it further away. But then you're going to take your lander, which is the parachute toy, and you can toss it in any way that you would want to toward the map. The first method that I'm going to try is holding it by the top of the parachute and tossing it toward the map and that wasn't very successful. So it did not land on the map. So you would let the next person take a turn and move back around. So now what I'm going to do is try it folded like this and tossing it toward the map. And the parachute itself landed on grid D1. What we would then do is go to our landing zone cards and we will pull out D1. Now D1, the grids designated D1, A1, A4, and D4 are actually considered going into orbit around Mars. So this would be designated as the Mars Odyssey rover, or orbiter, excuse me, and it gives information about the Odyssey orbiter, and at that point that participant would be done with their turn. We're going to see if we can land on a different grid square on Mars, and we landed on C4. Now C4, if we look at our flow chart, we have landed on the surface. We're going to go through our entry and landing descent phase, and then we roll our die to see if we had a successful landing or if we're going to have to go back and try again. So we'd roll the die out. There it is. It comes up on a 5. I don't know if you can see that very well, but 5. We go to our flow chart, and that is an unsuccessful landing. So at this point, they would not get to pick up a landing card. They would have to go take another turn and retry their landing. So as you would go through this, successful landings, you could take the post-it notes and put on each marker if you have a large number of youth participating, because you want to land on a grid square that has not been landed on before. So keeping in mind, you may try a couple of times and see if they get close or if they get the landers on the map itself. And if you see that's not working, move the map a little closer to the landings or to the launch site. This is a good activity to start to study the features of Mars and start to study what different things would make good landing sites or good base camp sites. And as you would do this, it encourages them to try to strategize where they would want to land on there too. The parachute's gonna be the kind of variable factor in this, because if there's any air movement in the room, it's going to move it around and they may not get to land where they want to. But each one of the landing zone cards has information about the site. It could be the topography of the site. It could be information about does it look like there might have been water there before? Does it look like it might be a good building site? Does it look like it has got some rough terrain that might make it a problem for their rover to cross? So each one of these would tell them a little bit more about the surface of Mars and what they're going to be experiencing to build their base camp.